All right. Welcome to Facepalm Sunday. Sunday. I'm Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week for this live episode of the Atheist Experience, my friend Atheist Dragnauct Sylvas. Woo!
What's going on? I decided to wear my scientist garb today just to be extra pretentious.
Yeah.
So
It's going to look great. Anytime anybody calls in with science, all you got to do is just like tug on the coat a little bit and they're done. I already warned them. Have your A game ready. So I went through the normal hypey stuff as if we were in the building and there were people on the other side of the wall. We are not in the building, and we will not be for the foreseeable future, at least until the stay-at-home order is lifted. However, our crew is the best crew on the whole fucking planet, and so we're able to do this show with nobody sitting there. That's how good we are. There are exactly as many people in that room as there are confirmed gods that are about to be called in and advocated for.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It's shocking. So I'm doing this from my house and Dragnaught's at his house. Oh, I said Dragnaught. I did it like Gary.
You've been listening to the soundboard too much. That's what happens.
And you know, our producer and our call screeners and our sound engineer, the Lord of Levels himself, they are all at their respective homes, and this is going to be awesome. However, a couple of things I need to warn people about, and that is that we are not using our standard call-in system during this, and so the number that you need to call is at the bottom of the screen right now, 512-991-9242. And there's also a toll-free number for US and Canada, which I don't see up on the screen, but I'm sure it'll be up there at some point. And we're using Call-In Studio, and that means that my voice has to go through this microphone, through my system, through Rendezvous into Wirecast over the internet in order to be sent to you, and then you would have to hear it and then respond, and then that's got to go back through channels before we hear it. So because of the extra delay, I will be making judicious use of the hold button, and that is just so that we don't create this noise of accidentally or on purpose talking over each other. And so I'll just put people on hold as the case may be, let them know they're on hold, then take them off hold. You'll be able to hear noises and stuff as we do that. Also, next weekend is Easter weekend. That's why this is Facepalm Sunday. And there was supposed to be the American Atheist National Convention. However, that was postponed almost a month ago or so is when they decided to postpone that. It will be postponed for a year, and it will be in Phoenix next year. Originally, the ACA had planned to do let's get the various speakers in and do kind of a remote event, mini online convention thing, because so many people are stuck at home in this situation. We're going to be making some changes to that. So Saturday, April 11th, beginning at 6 p.m. Central, we will be live streaming a special ACA Easter weekend gaming night, essentially. And so we'll have hosts from the various shows on Atheist Experience Network interacting, and it's still kind of free form, free flow, but you know, this is what we think is the smartest thing to do to both have fun and do something productive in this time period.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I had something that I wanted to go over, and you should take notes in case there's something here that needs to be corrected.
Okay. There's actually a friend of mine, Doc Savage, also Dr. Ian Bolton, who specializes in microbiology and immunology. He is also in the chat, so if I miss anything, he'll definitely catch it. So, but let me actually make this little disclaimer. What we're talking about right now, just that little banter between me and Matt, makes the difference between people trying to put out accurate information versus just trying to seem like they're correct, right? Anybody can put on a lab coat. Any idiot can put on a lab coat, but it's not about that. It's about making sure that you have a rigorous system of checking yourself and checking those around you, having that integrity, taking that extra time. So
absolutely correct. Any idiot can put on a lab coat. This week we've got this idiot. I'm the one in the wrong direction. So this idiot without a lab coat and Dragnaught with a lab coat. So I wanted to talk a little bit before we get started. We got calls queued up, and I want to make sure we get time to get to them about statistics and coronavirus, because I've been stuck here at home and it's been a mixed bag. But I've been going to, and you can go there yourself, worldometers.info/coronavirus, and it's updated regularly with the best information that they have access to. I'm sure there's something newer, but I mean, this is a good starting point to get data. Now, how reliable the data is, who knows? According to North Korea, they have 0 cases and have done 0 testing and have had 0 deaths. So, you know, and China hasn't been as forthcoming as they would like. There's actually no listing for how many tests China has done. And so that skews some of the statistics. But let me talk first about the United States of America. Because right now, the total corona cases worldwide, as of today, and you'll have to excuse me as I cough a moment, which has nothing to do with coronavirus. I just ate and drank something. So right now, worldwide, it looks like there's 1.2 million confirmed coronavirus cases and 68,475 deaths. But in the United States, we have now more than doubled what anybody else has reported. The United States is now at 331,519 cases. And there's a number of different statistics you could look at it. For example, you could take the 331,519 cases that are in the US and divide that by the 1,743,009 tests that the United States has done. And you could say accurately, 19% of Americans that were tested positive for the coronavirus, because we've done 1.7 million tests and 331,000 people were positive. And so that might lead people to believe that, you know, wow, that's 19% of everybody who's been tested has got this. So this is a big deal. The problem is that test set of 1.7 million is a skewed sample, as we are testing people who are either symptomatic or who are self-acknowledging risk. And a lot of that's going to include the people who are in the high risk doing the actual work, like ER room doctors and nurses. So that particular bit of math is, I would say, useless and misleading, because that number would have been lower if we just hadn't done as much testing. And you could then argue that it's not a big deal, which is exactly what the president tried to do when he had that cruise ship off there. And he's like, I don't want to add them in there because we've only got 15 and this will increase our numbers. And I'm just sitting here screaming, holy crap, do you want accurate data or not? And of course, that was a redundant question because he doesn't want accurate data. He didn't ever care about accurate data, and he's been behind on the information for this for a while. You could also look at the United States and say that there are 9,484 deaths out of the 331,519 cases. And that means that 2.8% of known cases in the United States have resulted in death. That is out of the total cases in the US. And we can compare that to other places. That is the tentative death rate in the United States, 2.8%. Worldwide, it's 5.4%, I believe, right now. The World Health Organization had estimated that it was possibly going to be around 3%. There are other people who think it should be lower, even 1% or below. But that information there, that 9,484 deaths in the United States, showing that it's 2.8% in the United States, we can compare that to other places. But we also don't know how accurately this represents the actual deadliness of the virus, as we don't know how many unknown cases did or didn't result in death. Maybe when we have all the data in, maybe that number goes down or the percentage goes down. Maybe it goes up. Maybe it stays the same. And that's why you can't just say, well, that's only the known cases. There's probably unknown cases out there that are going to lower that to below 1%. You can make a reasonable argument that the unknown cases are likely, based on statistical evidence, to lower that death rate further. But you don't have the data to say, oh, it's going to be 1%. You guys are just blowing this out of proportion. In other countries, that number, the percentage of cases that have died, varies from 12.3% in Italy to 9.4% in Spain to 8.4% in France. It's 4% in China, but China's data may be less reliable, and it is 1.5% in Germany. Now, all of those are terrifying. All of those are significant death rates, and I would expect those numbers to go down on average across the world. it's at 5.4%. There have been 68,000 deaths from coronavirus and 1.2 million known cases. There are other numbers, though, numbers that are potentially scarier. And that is, there are only 328,769 closed cases. So of the 1.2 million, we have closed 26% of the cases, and 74% of the cases, at 900,000, remain open. Of the open cases, 5% of those are in serious or critical condition, and 95% are in mild condition. And you can look at that and say, there's only 5% who are even in serious condition of the active cases. But if you look at the closed cases where, okay, this case is now over, 21% of those resulted in death. 79% resulted in them recovering and or being discharged. And so because we can't say for sure that everybody who is discharged is necessarily recovered. And because of this, people could lie with statistics. They could scare you with statistics. They could misrepresent what's actually going on. And so you could say that, well, of all the closed cases, 21% of them worldwide have resulted in death. And you would be accurate, but that doesn't mean you're necessarily reporting an accurate model of the death rate of the vaccine. We're not truly there yet. As we get more and more information, the numbers will change. You could create some incredibly scary numbers. For example, if you go to the chart, it'll show you that for the United States, there were 20,162 new cases in the last 24 hours. Now that's scary until you realize that that's just new cases due to the fact that we're doing more testing. Those people were still sick, whether we tested them and included them in the number or not. So it's not like the number of affected people actually changed. What's changing there is the number of people we now know to be affected. That number is because we're testing more, and without the testing number, that, it would be lower. It'd be like, hey, it could be like North Korea. If we're not doing any testing and we're not reporting our results to anybody, we don't care. Hey, we got 0 cases as far as we know. Look, I don't see no coronavirus. I don't see no problem. You could also create some incredibly optimistic numbers because the USA's death rate per 1 million population is 29, while Italy's is 263. But you also have to remember that that makes us look like we're 10 times better than Italy, but we're also a week or two behind them. And so we would have to compare this to Italy's numbers a week or two ago. Should we look at trends when we're looking at this information? Yes. And that's exactly what flattening the curve is all about. Changing the rate that is trending so that we don't overwhelm the limits of what our medical system can actually deal with. Should we assume that unknown cases will make the numbers better? Only to the extent that we have sound statistical models of the data showing that worldwide this is likely, or in a particular area this is likely. There are people who've died who are unknown cases, and there are people who've recovered who are unknown cases, but we don't have the data. We don't know the unknowns. And so it would be a mistake to start talking about the unknowns in anything more than a speculative sense, especially when we're looking at the data from coronavirus and just saying, look, the worldwide death rate right now is 5.4%. We believe that that's likely high and that it will be lowered as we get a better, more resolution on our data. But we don't know that. And so you should operate under the assumption that we are working within the best models that we have available. So the best course of action, because we're still trying to get a handle on this and we aren't incredibly confident of several different data points. So the best course of action is to take sensible precautions, including social distancing, to help lower the curve, and to continue testing while we work towards treatments and vaccines that can reduce the deadliness and impact of this situation. It sucks. I've mentioned before, normally I don't talk about this on the show, but once upon a time, 20 years ago, I lost a job and I was basically homebound for 18 months. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was almost certainly clinically depressed. And when I found myself free of that situation, I set up a new set of rules for me. This was how I handled it because I don't have something that's medically treatable in that realm. I made a rule that unless I was sick or there were some other extenuating circumstances, I would not stay home for more than 2 days without then going out and interacting with other people. That is a rule I put in place to keep me mentally stable, to make sure I was still interacting with people. I promise this cough is not corona. So this stay-at-home order has actually made things much, much, much more difficult. And I have felt awful and awkward at different times. And it sucks. It sucks being home. It sucks being home alone. Luckily I get to stream on Twitch, and I get to do these shows, and I get to have interactions with people in my life remotely over like video chat and things like that. But it struck me today that one could argue that this quarantining, this stay at home, this social distancing is us willfully acknowledging to pick what would easily be identified as the lesser of two evils. Yes, it absolutely sucks to stay at home, to carry around hand sanitizer if you can find it, to wear a bandana or some kind of mask when you go out in public, which is primarily to protect others from you than it is you from them, but we're changing recommendations. It's awful. It's nothing that any of us would have wanted, and it's nothing that we would have picked from a plurality of options. But given the available options, we're hopefully all able to recognize that we're choosing the lesser of two evils because it is the better solution for a better world. And so all the people who mock choosing the lesser of two evils, this coronavirus example is a prime example of why, yeah, sometimes you are stuck making a decision where there's only going to be one of a couple different outcomes, and none of them are great. None of them are preferred. None of them are good. Maybe you're not getting the candidate you want. Maybe you're not getting the specific legislation you want without some sort of amendment. Maybe you're having to make some kind of compromise in your life. Maybe in the process of various discussions, you are going to have to say, all right, let's put a pin in this thing so that we can talk about this other thing first, even though it's an annoying conversation that I don't know is going to move us forward. Opting for the lesser of two evils is still opting for the better choice. And if you're working towards building a better world, you have to keep making the decisions that result in a better world. And for now, the ACA is going to continue producing its content. We are doing it all remotely. We are thrilled that there are people here watching and calling in and interacting. But primarily, keep yourself and the people around you safe and healthy. Follow the recommended precautions, and tune in on Saturday to watch us play games and have fun and do that stuff, and do that stuff yourself. It's very easy. And if you have people who are sheltered in your home with you, just be grateful for the time that you actually get to spend with them, even if it gets to the point where you're like, oh, I can't spend another minute with these people. There are people who are sheltering in place completely alone. And the only thing that might be a little more concerning than that is that statement is true even before any of this happened, that there are people who constantly feel that they have no one to interact with, including many people who are formerly religious. And so while we build the atheist community of Austin so that there's a community for people finding their way out of religion and a number of media productions that allow people to call in to discuss those options, that sort of thing isn't necessarily available to everyone locally. And this is one of the reasons why we're doing it in the Austin area and now remotely to the world. So, welcome to the show. Any other news on the statistics and the corrections and the stuff?
Oh, it was a very positive message, and that there is when you take a computational statistics course, of course they go over lying with statistics, and it's not necessarily always that nefarious, but there's always a sense of people see big numbers and they just kind of presume things, and so you kind of get disabused of that throughout the course. And I think it's important to talk about that. It's important to talk about, yes, you see big numbers, but you seeing big numbers or you seeing an abundance of a particular phenomena doesn't mean that the phenomena is actually occurring at a rate that's higher than expected. That it simply means in most cases that you're now cognizant of this phenomena and how, I guess, how prolific it is.
Yeah.
And it's an important distinction to make.
It reminds me a little bit of the increase in the number of autism diagnoses.
Yes.
Because what happened was we got a better understanding of what's actually going on here. and we redefined the category so that it would, more accurately represent what was going on. And then it looks like, oh, autism cases are going up. We did the same thing when we redefined the poverty level. And all of a sudden, how do we have so many fewer or so many more poor people than we had last week? You don't. You just changed the way your model is addressing this, and hopefully in a way that is constantly working on being more accurate in the best interest of people.
Right. Yeah, I do want to correct something real quick. So I am not a doctor. I'm looking at the chat right now. I am an undergrad that's about to finish his degree in biology with a specialization in cellular, molecular, and biotechnology. Before COVID, I was doing undergraduate research in a biochemistry lab, researching essential amino acid synthesis and Medicago truncellata. It's a plant, basically. So that's where my background, and I was also a combat medic in the Army, for those who know that running gag. That is actually true, but I repeat that because some people like to mention their military service because it's really, really important to them. Me, it's, it helped me get to where I am now, but what I'm trying to do now is ultimately get into cancer research. And so this stint that I'm doing in biochemistry is to help with another leg of my journey, because where I'm going it's a field that requires several different specializations, immunology, biochemistry being two of the primary ones. And so that's what I'm working on now. Well, before COVID.
And it's a shame that, you're married, and yet you just became that much sexier to sapiosexuals and people who have a fetish for former military or current military or people in lab coats, or,
I'm checking a lot of boxes here. Yeah.
You just became like 43% sexier in the last minute or so. I want to address some people. I don't watch chat, the chat that's going on with the show, but I have other people who care about me who do watch chat, who occasionally send me messages. And so my girlfriend was pointing out, people in the chat are saying, stop coughing into your hand. And I was like, how silly, because it's my hand and it's not going near anybody else. But then they made the follow-up point of, it's just good practice. And so, okay.
Right. I agree on that point. And I agree with them from that. You can't really reinfect yourself that way, but it is good practice. I told some people on Discord, if I had the nitrile gloves that I have in the lab, I would wear them around. They go, well, why would you do that? When I have gloves on my hand, I'm already trained not to touch my face.
Right.
And people have probably seen me touch my face 5 times already because it's such a habit. So it is about building good habits. And I would not want to touch my face after touching the stuff that I touch in the lab at all. So.
Yeah, I wish I had. I did have some of those nitrile gloves for a while, but I've since run out. And so on the rare occasions, and like I barely left the house in the last few weeks, apart from going to get food, staples and whatnot. Not staples, but bread and stuff like that. Right. That doesn't last very long. Apart from that, I don't leave the house, and I've only had food delivered to the house, I think, once in the last week and a half. It's just, and it's because when I was out there getting food, the person at the grocery store wasn't wearing gloves. And actually, I shit you not, they had little plastic bags that they're going to put the food in. And she reaches over and she goes to get the bag open and loose. And I was just like, I'm immediately reaching for my hand sanitizer and wiped off the edge of the bag. And she had the nerve. It was a regular line, a regular checkout line, but they had put up a little paper sign next to it that was like 15 items or less. And I think I had 20 something, but I didn't see the sign because all the other ones have it marked at the top. And so she's in a bad mood, and I don't want to give her a hard time because she's there working in the midst of all this shit. I can't imagine.
Right.
But she's like, she starts ringing stuff up and she goes, this is like the conveyor belt wasn't working. She goes, that's probably why it's 15 items or fewer. And I said, actually, it says 15 items or less, and I didn't see the sign until you pointed it. But I wanted to do why the fuck are you licking your thumb and using it to open a plastic bag? Why don't you have gloves? Right. And so that really got me to where I'm not going out and interacting with people much at all. Got a bandana.
There you go.
Hey, you can see the call queue. Is there a particular caller that you felt like starting with? I'm going to let you steer?
Yeah. Well, I want to go with people who've been on and waiting for a little while and have interesting. Uh, let's go with Gavin. Yeah, he's been hanging out.
Gavin on line 6.
Well, hello. I actually wasn't expecting to get on this early.
Well, we like you more than other people, evidently. How you doing, Gavin?
I'm good. I'm actually calling to try to find any problems with my rationale. In other words, I'm expecting there to be problems with my rationale.
Okay. Shoot.
Okay.
Okay, so the stance that I'm taking concerning the matters of a soul, I have not been able to expunge this concept of belief out of me, which I've actually tried to. Not to say that there's any problem with believing in something, but a rational mind versus a unconscious mind. When I was younger, I had a head injury which might cause these problems with my ability to expunge this belief concept. Most things that we believe are founded in a very deep unconscious experience or very early on ages. And I have not been able to expunge this out of me, so I've kind of found a happy medium between the two. So,
Well,
but nonetheless,
let's get to the case for the soul, because how difficult it is for you to get over doesn't have any bearing on whether or not it's a particularly decent argument for a soul.
Absolutely true. So there's a sense called proprioception.
Proprioception. So first of all, people get it wrong when they say, "Oh, you've got 5 senses." No, you got loads and loads and loads of senses, including like sense of balance, and proprioception is one of them, which is the awareness of the position of your body.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I have found in my out-of-body experiences, which, mind you, almost all of my out-of-body experiences I accept as hallucinations of the brain, basically the concept of I've actually fallen asleep and I'm unaware that I've actually fallen asleep, which in and of itself is very peculiar.
Yeah, sort of lucid dreaming and stuff like that. There's no evidence that what people call out-of-body experiences is in any way them actually out of their body, and in every circumstance where we've set up test protocols to try to confirm this, we have failed to demonstrate the actual phenomenon.
Exactly. I have some ideas as to how to try to test it out, but first I actually have to need to find a way to reproduce it at any moment. I need to find a way to reproduce it 100% of the time. But
it's kind of important.
I would like to utilize. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's kind of important for you to reproduce the phenomena if you're trying to test it. It sounds like there's just simple physiological. Well, simple. There are known physiological interactions that your mind and body are having, right, and that you're almost attributing a supernatural quality to it. That's what it comes across.
No, see, that's part and parcel of the problem. I'm wanting to attribute, and the intellectual part of my mind is not wanting to.
Sure.
I can't get over this desire to believe in something more. So I'm trying to find a happy medium. So the happy medium is I need to define it by science first.
Well, how do you know that you can't get over this desire? Because there are lots of things people desire. Or essentially you're saying you wish it were true that there was something more, and you can't not wish it were true. Okay, but at least you also recognize that when you're wishing it's true, you're acknowledging that you have no good reason to think it is.
Yes.
So what you're trying to get over, it isn't like a state of cognitive dissonance where you're actually believing something in the face of acknowledging that it's not worthy of belief and that you don't believe it. You're instead saying, I don't believe this, but everything about me keeps wishing and hoping that it were true.
Yes, essentially, yes. True.
Okay. Well, I think as long as you recognize that you're actively engaged in like wishful thinking, I don't know how damaging it can be, because it seems like your brain already has an active kind of check valve there to keep you from perhaps going too far. But what does proprioception have to do with the soul?
Okay, so proprioception, forgive me if I ever mispronounce it. You know what it is that I'm talking about, because I've got my
We'll just go with sense of self, with the body position.
Okay, so the body position can be tricked, in a manner of speaking. Now, that being aside from the point for a moment, and I say only for a moment because let's say you're lying down in bed, you have your eyes closed, you know everything that's around you. You know the temperatures, you know the vibrations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you end up coming up with a hallucination of it, if you will. I hate saying you end up coming up with a hallucination. That's not exactly how it works.
No.
Your brain.
I have. Let me see if I can get somewhere real quick, and if not, then I'll let you continue. So I can cover my eyes and I can touch my thumb and finger together without looking. And that's because I know the position of those, but it's also because of years. I'm 51 now. So it's years and years and years and years and years of being familiar with that. And it doesn't matter. For example, I suffer from diabetic neuropathy. So my pinkies are essentially numb from the outside edge into about halfway into this middle finger is numb and tingly. That doesn't stop me from being able to touch them. And it doesn't seem remotely extraordinary that I can also tell roughly where my hands are or anything else. I play a lot and have played for years, first-person shooters at the highest level. And so I have a fairly high sense of spatial awareness, even in non-real spaces. So once I understand a map layout, I can carry a model of it in my head and know, based on what I heard, what happened, what direction a rocket or whatever came from, exactly where other people are on the map. I can do the same thing here at my house. Like, unless somebody else comes along and puts stuff in different places, I can blindfold myself and make my way through my house really easily, because I have an internal memory-based model of my house, which is incredibly accurate from years of living here. If this was the first time I'd ever been in this space, I would not be as aware of the features of this house as I am. And so how is it remotely remarkable that after 51 years of having this particular body and being with it all the time through every change, that I have a really good sense of where this body is, if after living in my house for just 5 years or running through an in-game map a couple times, I have a really good sense where you could do that blindfolded.
Well, I'm not talking about a simple memory. I'm talking about an actual hallucination, such as a dream. The brain is capable of manifesting hallucinations. A dream is a hallucination in and of itself. Can we agree on that?
Is a dream a hallucination?
I'm not. Yeah. I've never heard anyone describe it like that. I guess if that's where you want to go with it, fine. But I'm not sure kind of how that helps get you to your conclusion, because that's kind of what I've been lost on, as to how are you making these connections, even though it seems like you rationalize yourself out of it in a sense, but I'm not really sure how you even initially made these connections, to be honest.
Oh, and I have to admit, I'm not going full-blown because there's a limited time frame. More of a full-blown concept is that there are several different levels of hallucinations, but that in and of itself, so I'm trying to go step by step, which makes me sound more like one of your regular callers. Oh, yeah. My God.
Gavin, as soon as you start talking about like levels of hallucination, all a hallucination is an instance where you have a perception of something that isn't accurately mapped to reality and that isn't necessarily tied to reality. Your sense of self isn't a hallucination because that's directly tied to reality. You have nerve endings that tell you where things are and what's hot and what's cold and whether there's air blowing and things like that. You have all of that stuff. But it doesn't matter whether or not there's levels of hallucination. Are there any confirmed levels of hallucination that aren't still merely products of the mind?
Confirmed, absolutely not. That's one of the reasons why I was calling in, was to try to figure out what I have as of right now, what the flaws are. I was hoping to get into some of my hopeful scientific experiments.
The flaws are simple. There's no evidence that anything about hallucinations requires or necessarily points to or makes the case stronger that there is a soul.
Right. So that's if you want to, if you want to relegate it to the realm of science, the fact that you can't really repeat this phenomenon accurately, or at least somewhat on a regular basis, enough for you to test, that should tell you that you may want to reevaluate the original observation, right? Because you've made some type of observation about something in reality, and you've drawn your conclusion as to what it possibly might be, and it sounds like it's a tentative conclusion, but at what point do you encounter a scenario that would disabuse you of this? I think is my question, because if we're talking about science, there has to be some scenario or scenarios in which your original observation is inaccurate.
Well, you specified something that is completely legitimate, but I do have some level of accuracy. I have not mastered it yet, and there's the difficulty. So what I was hoping to do was master the experience and then go to a sensory deprivation chamber and complete the experiment until I know.
Hang on.
Go ahead. Sorry.
How will that complete the experiment? You have in your head something that is, oh, I haven't mastered this yet, but I'm hoping to master it. And then when I do master it, I'll go to a sensory deprivation tank to complete the experiment. How the hell would you have any idea what would complete the experiment for something that you haven't mastered and haven't well defined? I mean, what exactly is your methodology that you're establishing a protocol where you know what's going to complete the experiment?
The experiment that I've established, that doesn't mean that it's a verifiable experiment. That doesn't mean something that it is something that will prove everything to everybody. It is something that will allow me to go, okay, now I can take it to the next step.
If you're just trying to convince yourself, then don't even worry about science. Science isn't about trying to convince yourself. I can convince myself without putting on this lab coat, without going to a lab or doing anything. Right. That the reason I go to the lab that I go to is because I think there's a particular phenomenon that happens within a particular plant. Right. There is an enzyme that does something to a molecule, and I need to be able to show that this hypothetical gene is the thing that's doing what I think it's doing. There is a scenario in which that is not the case, and there are scenarios in which that is the case. And so these experiments aren't for me to convince myself. I'm already convinced. I need to convince other people, and that's what it's about.
Yes, I'm trying to complete a personalized. All right, so utilizing the scientific method, I shouldn't say it in that fashion because I don't even presume to know scientific methods. Utilizing what I know of scientific methods, I have to be capable of producing something that is verifiable, something that is reproducible, something that can be removed from all my own personal senses. If I can remove it from all of my own personal senses, if I can show other people how to reproduce it, et cetera, then I have something that I can continue on with. Nonetheless, the whole reason for me doing it anyways is that it curbs my depression in and of itself, in which case I want to continue doing it, even if it is not what I'm hoping it to be. So, even if it's not what I'm hoping it to be, I'm going to continue in this. But I am hoping that it is something more. But for me to be able to prove that it's something more, I have to be able to at least get past certain obstacles for me to be able to present it to the world and say, here is my findings. Let me take it to scientists. Let me show them how to do something. Let me show them blah, 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 to where they can potentially reproduce it.
Well, good luck to you. I can't wait to read your research when you get there, man. Best of luck. Other than that, I don't really have anything else.
I was actually calling for the hope that you would actually find some kind of screw up in my rationale, but I haven't even gotten to the rationale yet of the proprietors. I never.
Well, I thought that we identified a number of problems. Go ahead. You take a few seconds and give us your rationale, and if it's not already covered in what our concerns are. I mean, it's like if somebody calls me and says, hey, I have this sensation and I have this desire, and I fully acknowledge that this desire doesn't necessarily tie to anything that's true, and the thing that I'm perceiving with this sensation doesn't necessarily result in the conclusion that I'd like it to. And I'm going to study this and become a master. And then at some point, I'm going to conclude the test. But the test isn't going to necessarily confirm the thing that I wanted to confirm. It's like, what the fuck are you doing? It's like you have your methodology is not methodology. It is, I'm going to keep exploring this, and then I'm going to wind up with some conclusion that isn't. It's like you can't get from A to B until you demonstrate. Like, let's say that we found something about proprioception that is not accounted for by any mechanism in the brain. How do we know whether or not that's because it's something external, or if it's some function of the brain that we have yet to identify? And even if it was something external, how would we then show that it's a soul, or the type of soul that you're looking for? It's like you haven't even done the basics to figure out how you could get from A to B until you can. It's wishful thinking all the way down. You wish there's this, and now you might as well just be wishing that whatever process you go through gets you somewhere. That ain't science.
Well, I don't think that the soul is necessarily separate from the body or separate from physicality.
You think the soul is a physical entity as a part of the body?
Yes.
Really? How did you come to that
nothing. Okay. Well, mind you, I'm utilizing the term soul, but which is a difficulty because of all the baggage that comes along with it. But I didn't want to go into it in this fashion. In Deuteronomy, it makes reference that the neshama, which is the highest level of soul that human beings can attain to, unless you're Jewish, which means that you can attain to something higher. But the highest level of soul that you can attain to is what's referred to as a neshama. And it references that the neshama can be killed. In other words, everybody who is purporting the idea that the soul is eternal is really not paying attention to what Christian or Jewish scripture specifies. Now, whatever Hindu scripture specifies or Buddhist scripture specifies, that I'm definitely anywhere knowledgeable about. But there is nothing that I have seen within my own experiences that specify that a soul, if a soul exists, and I'm hopeful that a soul exists, can necessarily exist outside of the body.
Okay, so your response to my question of how you know that the soul exists and that it's part of the body was that you've not seen anything say that it's not separate from the body. Is that a summation?
That is not separate from the body, yes.
Okay, if it's not separate from the body, then how is it not plausible to say that the thing that you're trying to label soul is just an amalgamation of functions of the brain?
A hallucination.
No, that's not what he said.
That's complete. You're right. I shouldn't have I wasn't trying to be disrespectful whenever I specified it in that fashion. The concept of hallucination that I was trying to get into, I'm a very big proponent of
I'm no longer remotely interested, because now we're at the point where essentially you've called in to talk about an argument for a soul, but the soul that you're defining isn't consistent with any traditional notions of a soul. You've just decided to take things that, as far as we can tell, are products of the brain and define them as a soul.
According to the Bible, according to the Torah,
why do I give a fuck about the Bible or the Torah? The Bible or the Torah, by the way, both advocate for a potential notion of a soul that is separate from the body and persists after the body is dead.
The Torah, no.
The Torah isn't very clear on what potentially happens after death, because it just says stuff like he died and slept with his fathers. However, it does have the notion of people interacting after they were dead. You know, the people.
Torah does?
All right.
The Torah does?
All right. So if we're only talking about the Pentateuch, probably not. But
well, technically speaking, I'm not even wanting.
None of this fucking matters. None of this matters, Gavin. Why should I give a shit what the Torah says?
Technically, you shouldn't.
There, that's it.
All right.
And technically speaking, I shouldn't.
Yep. Thanks for the call.
We agree.
So I got this notion of a soul, and it's not really consistent with any religion. And I'm just going to go with the Torah, because the Torah really doesn't say that much about the soul. And the less you say about the soul, the more compelling my notion sounds.
Well, you know, Matt, the reason I'm 6 feet tall is because of the dragon soul within me, right? I have a dragon soul. I can't really define what it is, but if you read volume 26 of the anime fairy tale, the manga version, you'll
it makes sense. It's like the whole time I was watching Tiger King on Netflix, I kept expecting Charlie Sheen to show up, talking about tiger's blood.
Yeah,
because that's the level of batshittery we were dealing with out there.
I'm only on episode 6 of Tiger King, and yeah.
All right. So we've got Brian in Washington, D.C., who says he'd like to convert Matt and all his atheist friends to the Catholic Church. You know the evidence. You would lose nothing and gain everything.
Oh, I've been waiting on this.
Brian, you're on with Dragnauct and Matt. Why would you like to convert us, and how would you like to go about it?
Well, first, Matt, thank you so much for having me. I'm a huge fan of yours. And here's the thing. You already know all the arguments for Jesus resurrecting from the dead. I've seen your debates. You're an excellent debater. You know about the empty tomb. You know about his missing body, which we can agree has never been found.
No,
you know about the eyewitness evidence.
Yeah, except what I know is that we don't have any eyewitness accounts, and what we have is a story about an empty tomb, and an empty tomb doesn't prove anything, and a story about a missing body, which doesn't even prove that there was a body or anything else. But you went down this path of if I
yeah, let me get my invite. This is an invite. If it's okay, I'd just like to extend the invite. Okay.
Hang on. You get it? Hang on. You went down this path of I already know the evidence and the arguments, and essentially then you immediately moved to Pascal's wager by suggesting that I would lose nothing and gain everything. Is that true? That if I were just to agree with you now, would I lose nothing and gain everything? Is that really true?
Well, here's my argument. I'm not saying you agree with the evidence. I'm saying you've debated it. So you know what Christians claim about the eyewitness evidence,
yes,
the martyred apostles.
Yeah.
So my argument is, what is wrong with trying to be a saint? Now imagine if all my atheist friends and everyone in the world, Christians too, of course, because there's a lot of evil Christians, what is wrong with being a saint? I mean, what would our world look like if we can imagine it? So,
well, I would imagine I would imagine that it would look very much like this world, where there are a bunch of people who are within the Catholic Church who are trying to be saints while propping up an organization that is hiding rapists.
Well, Matt, here's the thing. The Catholic Church, obviously, it's one of the largest charity organizations in the United States.
I don't care.
In the worst of the days Okay, well, here's the thing.
If I'm giving away all my money, if I'm giving away all my money, but I'm wandering around raping nuns and children, does that make me good?
No, but you don't understand the facts. First of all, you're not giving away all your money.
I do understand.
So much money.
I know the Catholic Church is definitely not giving away all of its money. It's one of the most wealthy things on the planet. We should bankrupt the Catholic Church and give all of its possessions to the poor. That's what we should do.
Well, Matt, here's the thing. I know people are very eager to point out the flaws in the members, which is true. But the fact is that less than 5% of Catholic priests were ever accused of abuse.
Okay,
that's a lower rate than public school teachers.
If it was 1%, the fact that the upper clergymen help hide it. If it was just something that existed at the lower levels here and there, and in Oklahoma and wherever else, that wouldn't be such, because it happens in regular churches. The church has a fund dedicated specifically for this. They purposely have been indicted because they have helped move pedophile from parish to parish to parish to parish. It's not like you can minimize it, but if there was one instance of it, that's one too many, man. Like this is the problem with why those of us who aren't religious don't believe y'all when you talk about morals, because, oh, well, we'll just minimize child rape because it makes us look bad. I'm sorry, child rape is bad.
Yeah, we're not as bad as this other one. By the way, that's the two-coquet fallacy. Brian, you're on mute because you started this call off entirely wrong. You started this by telling the call screener that you wanted to convert us because we would lose nothing and gain everything. That is, by the way, Pascal's wager, which I have already pointed out exactly why it is not a reasonable argument at all. And so I tried to ask you, and I tried to focus on, is it true what you say here that I'm going to lose nothing and gain everything? And instead, you start talking about what would the world be like if people were trying to be saints. Well, first of all, I wasn't a Catholic. I was a Southern Baptist. So I thought you were a heathen, a Mary worshiping, saint worshiping, non-biblical heathen, even back when I was a Christian. So you guys could probably sort that stuff out. But when your response to people rightly pointing out that the church that you're advocating for, the one that you attend, the one that you, I'm assuming, probably donate money to, when they're rightly pointing out problems with that organization, that criminal organization, and your response is to say, well, somebody else is worse, and the Catholic Church donates a lot of money to charity, what you are doing is just waving red herrings around, hoping that people forget the actual problem. And here's the problem. I'm going to unmute you, and I'm going to ask you a couple questions. Does God know what's going on? No, I said I was going to ask you a couple questions. Does God know what's going on?
Okay, don't be so angry. Yeah.
Oh, no. I'm going to mute you for a second, because first of all, you haven't never seen me angry. But second of all, if there's anything to be angry about, it's about people who have sacrificed their humanity in order to make excuses for a criminal organization that shields child rapists from prosecution and detection. How dare you accuse me of being angry as if it were the wrong thing to do? Now, does God know what's going on?
Here's the fact.
All right.
Yeah,
bye.
I have facts to respond to you whenever you're ready.
No, you don't. You're done. Because I took you off mute because I had specific questions for you. You're not going to come in here and make excuses that are pathetic. Hey, Dragnaught.
So,
I wanted to ask you.
Oh, yeah.
Is it really true that if I start believing in the Catholic Church or the Catholic's view of Christianity that I will lose nothing and gain everything?
That's bullshit. I'm not sure how you. Well, for one thing, I'm pretty sure people might have an issue with you, running AXP here. I'd have to presume you lose that immediately. But let's not pretend that. On a serious note, when you genuinely have a conversion to a religion, your life fundamentally changes. You have to abstain from doing certain things. So yes, you
have to abstain from acknowledging that the church that you're now a part of is a corrupt criminal organization. That's what I would be giving up. I would be giving up honesty, integrity, the truth, humanism. I would be giving up all of those things for a fiction that or something that a proposed fiction that nobody can demonstrate is actually true.
But you would gain Jesus. Don't you like Jesus?
No, not one bit.
I love these guys, man.
I don't think that the notion of infinite torment for finite crimes is just. I don't think the notion of substitutionary atonement is just. I don't think the notion of original or inherited sin is just. I find the God of the Bible and Jesus to be laughably antiquated and pre-K level thinking in their theology. I am smarter than both of them. I am more moral than both of them. And anybody who thinks that that's just amazingly arrogant is someone who has sacrificed both their intellect and their humanity on the altar of a God that they can't demonstrate.
Ooh, it's hot fire.
Yeah. Make me stay at home longer. Let's see how deep this goes.
I like this. I like it. We need a palate cleanser, Matt.
We do?
We need a palate cleanser. I think line 11, Kamal. I think I know who that is.
I think
I want to say this will be a good palate cleanser.
Hey, Kamal, what's up, man?
What's happening, brothers? What's happening? Matt, Drag, I must say I am used to seeing you with your shirt off, but with that lab coat, brother, you are looking like a sexy beast.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Is this the same Kamal that's in my Discord?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. I thought it was you. What's going on, man?
Man, same old suit, just reheated, brother. I'm sitting over here, quarantining and trying to stay safe. That's all. I hope everybody else is too.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I got to tell y'all something, Matt. It reminded me. What happened to me about a week ago reminded me of a show you did when you got your birthday card.
Yeah,
I'm sure you remember that
vividly. It was a year ago this week.
I got an invite to Facebook, and I didn't know. I wasn't expecting nothing like that. But it was when I got to it. It was all my friends. It was some of my friends, not all of my friends, just a few that my family know, and some of my family. And they were trying their best to get me to come back to Jesus. This was their Facebook intervention. This is what they called it.
Uh-oh.
And I'm on the Facebook, and and I got to say this to the guy who just called "fuck the Catholic Church," brother.
Amen.
I make sure I get that.
Whether or not there's some truth behind their religion or anything else, fuck the Catholic Church, just entirely bankrupt that organization.
Exactly. And my family's Catholic, and so everybody. But the funny thing is, they had some friends of mine I got two friends that are Muslim. I got another friend that's Southern Baptist. He's like the Bible is just the absolute word, and they're all different, like all these different. But the thing they wanted me to do was just come back to Jesus. That was the whole point. Now I didn't know if I should get mad, and I'm home alone. I mean, going through a little depression, man. I had a few people that really looked out for me when I needed them, and I really appreciate. They know who they are, and they helped me kind of get myself back up, because I was really in a dark place a few weeks back, man. I really was. And then I get this shit. I get everybody ganging up on me. So I'm just listening to everybody, and I got so angry. I was so fucking angry, and I had to calm down. Like I couldn't breathe almost. I was so angry. And then I thought about you, man. I thought about what you went through with the birthday card and that. And the way you handled it was the way you handled yourself, and the way you handled the whole situation it helped me, brother, because I went to the show and I watched it to calm down, sort of. But I'm still, right now, I'm shaking just talking about it, man. And that's how angry I was. And I haven't been able to speak to my therapist. She's been off, and it's really been rough, but I'm trying. I do have. Go ahead, brother.
No, I hear you, and I'm glad it was useful. It's one of the reasons why I decided to talk about it, and it's one of the most one of the clips that I hear the most about. I mean, people will constantly talk about how frustrating it was to be in similar situations and dealing with all this, because there was a public image of me that like, oh, Matt doesn't have to deal with this sort of stuff. Yeah, yes, I actually do. And in some cases, much, much more of it.
And I watch Drag a lot too, man. Like he keeps me laughing first thing in the morning. Get your ass up. I appreciate that, brother. So he helps me. He's helped me a lot without knowing it. Himself, just watching his show and laughing, being able to laugh first thing in the morning. Because sometimes I can't sleep. I haven't been sleeping well.
That makes two of them.
Yeah. So
I was asleep. I was awake still at 7 o'clock this morning. And in the past week, I've slept like 2 hours here, 4 hours here, 2 hours here. I feel you, man.
Yeah. And I don't, I'm kind of,
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I'm a little lost, but I was calling for some advice. I know you're not doctors and all that shit, man, but I do admire you a lot, Matt. I admire you too, Drag, and what you're doing with your, with school and that's I think is great, brother. And I can't wait to see you graduate and all that kind of stuff. I'm sure you're gonna show it, and I can't wait to see it. But
yeah, I mean, I'll let people know so people want to come down, and because we're going to have a celebration. But what the scenario that you've put forth, this family intervention, I've somewhat gone through that in spurts. Very early on, when I first I was more vocal on social media about me being a non-believer, I would get little messages here, Skype or Facebook, and an uncle who was concerned that I might be falling away from the faith. And I was like, no, I've already fallen away. It's been some time now. And, all this God-hating stuff that I'm putting up there, I can't hate something I don't believe in. But, here, let me explain to you. And I took my time to explain to him the issues that I have and sort of my rough sort of epistemological framework for what it was worth. And all that effort I put in was all for naught. Oh, I love you, nephew. If you ever need me, call me. But I got to block you. Boop. And so that was it. And that's kind of how my family interacts with people they disagree with. And I actually linked this Atheist Experience in a family Facebook group, by the way. I want them to try me, right? Get to a point where if they feel so strongly in their faith, they're so goddamn smart and they're so certain, they need to be able to come to you with their best to see if they can really bring you back to the fold. Because I'm at the point now where a lot of them won't even interact with me because I've heard everything that they've had to say.
It's like the Catholic who calls in with Pascal's wager.
Yeah, like it's just it becomes run the mill. Like they repeat the same fallacious arguments over and over again. The anger will dissipate. Exactly. But yeah, your anger will dissipate. I can promise you when you realize that they're not in control of their own minds. And as demeaning as that is, it's true. They, in a sense, and this is not all theists, my family members that sound like yours will give their brains over to whoever's in that pulpit and they'll just repeat whatever they heard. And so it's easy. It's like shooting fish in a barrel. So I would say while we're doing this COVID and chill and we're all, disconnected but connected, take some time to go back and review that conversation at your leisure, right? But then dissect it, make it your bitch, because the second that you get a hold of these conversations, you gain a leg up over anybody who presents anything to you damn near.
And that's why I watch, that's why I watch you a lot, Drag, when you do your reviews of certain, G-Man. I love that shit. It just blows my mind. It's just hilarious. And I want to get to that point. The last time I talked to Matt, I was trying to tell, I thought that I was at that point. I thought I was at a point where I could handle it. Because I actually had a conversation with a guy at the bus station when I was coming back home from Detroit. I thought I was okay, but it's kind of hard. And I want to get to where you are, brother. Like you said, I want to be able to argue the points and tell them, bring it on. If you now I can say shit like, well, you tell me that a man died and came back after 3 days. Explain that to me. You tell me that there was a talking snake. You tell me that two people, created everybody in the world, and I can argue those, but sometimes it gets deeper, and I don't know. I've read the Bible, but I can't repeat it verbatim, but I do know some of a lot of the things that they talk about, and it doesn't, shit just don't make sense to me. So I don't believe, and they can kiss my ass if they don't, because I'm not coming back. I'm not. And until you can show, if God came to me right now and say, hey, Kamal, I'm here, I would still be like, okay, you got some shit to answer for.
Exactly. That's the thing that a lot of people overlook. And I'm going to try and I'm going to let you go, Kamal, because we got tons of stuff and we've got like 25 minutes left in the show, but I'm going to try and sum this up with the thought that I was having. People fail to realize, what would the world look like if the God they believed in actually existed? If there was a loving, wise God who genuinely cared about me? Why on earth would I ever have to hear somebody's personal testimony, or somebody making excuses for the Catholic Church, or somebody using Pascal's wager, or somebody using one of a dozen flawed arguments? Why would any of that ever be necessary if, in fact, there was a loving God who genuinely cared about me? Why am I not deserving of a Damascus Road experience? Why does this God supposedly play favorites? None of the world makes sense in the light of a God actually existing. But all of the world makes sense in the light of people afraid of dying, afraid of being alone, afraid of the unknown, banding together to prop up ideas that allow them to hide their discomfort. The world makes perfect sense under that model.
Right. Hey, brother, I'm gonna let y'all go, man. I appreciate it. I'm gonna go back and watch this later on and think about it a lot. But I really appreciate your time, brothers. Y'all know, Matt, you my hero, bro. I just being honest about it. You are, man. And if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be. I didn't have the courage a long time ago to even talk about those kinds of things, and you helped me do that. I know I tell you that all the time, brother, but it is what it is.
And when all this is over, I mean, you take care of yourself, and when all this is over, let's get you down to Austin to hang out, maybe for Faithless Forum if we're clear by then. All right, buddy.
All right, I'll talk to y'all soon.
I'll be on Discord later, man.
Thanks for dropping by. All right, so do you want to go? I'm thinking Carlos.
Yeah, my fellow Houstonian.
Yeah, so here's Carlos from Houston, who wanted to call in and talk to Drag and myself about the flood. And it says here that we say God killed many living creatures, but God gave them their life so he can determine how much life they get. All right. I don't know how that's remotely an argument for the story being true, but my argument against the story isn't that God killed a bunch of people. It's that the story isn't true. And if you were to say God gave you life so he can determine how long it is, okay, but that has nothing to do with whether or not God is just or humane. I can't stop a giant from squashing me like a bug. I can't stop aliens from coming here and zapping me. I can't stop a God from killing me right now. Although I think it would be really in his best interest to just kill me right now, right here while we're on the show live, for God to show up and say, nope, you've mocked me and disregarded me long enough, so now I'm going to take you out. But I don't understand what that has to do with the flood, because my objection isn't that, I don't believe this because if it's true, God killed everybody but 8 people. I don't believe it because there isn't sufficient evidence to warrant belief in it. So
right, there's a number of issues with the flood, the global flood story. So I'm genuinely curious.
Let's hear what you got, Carlos.
Hello, how are you? Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
Good.
My statement is, I'm not a religious man. I don't belong to any religion. Religions have done some very good things, but have done a lot of damage for humankind. So I'm not Jewish. I'm not religious, nothing. But my statement is, if someone reads the Bible, and in that book there is a God that gives life, and then he gives as much life as he wants to give. He gives a day of life. He gives 900 years of life. Okay, the person that reads the Bible either is going to understand it and like the story and agree with that, or he's going to disagree, and that means that he didn't understand the story. I'm not saying I'm not siding with the Bible. I'm not going against the people that say that's a lie. I'm just stating the fact that it's a story that whoever reads it has to understand that there is a God in that story that gives as much life as he wants. So be okay with it.
No. Okay. So I can listen to any story I want, any narrative, and draw my own conclusions. Whether I understood the story or not is different than whether I agree with the actions that occurred in said story. You do know that there's a distinction there, right?
No, but okay. If you see the movie of Batman, he doesn't kill the big guys. He takes them to a hospital because he's a good man. He doesn't kill the guys. So it's not a matter of understanding or misunderstanding more than the fact that that's the story that you read. You read the story, you agree with Batman. Batman is a good guy. He's not going to let the bad guy die. That's it. That's it. So it's the same with the Bible. Somebody reads the Bible. There is a God in that book that says that he gives as much life as he gives. Well, it's understood that he's going to take the life away from anybody that he wants at any time.
Okay. You're monumentally wrong, and I don't care. So now we've entered into Curious Realm because you've just equated the Bible with Batman, and you managed to get both of them wrong. Go watch Dark Knight a little bit, but your thing is, oh, it's just a story. You should just be okay with it. No, when I watch Star Wars and I watch the scene with the destruction of Alderaan, that doesn't mean I have to be okay with the actions that fictional creature took. It's there to tell a story where you're supposed to make moral judgments about who are the bad guys and who's not. And if the bad guy is the person that you're just going to say, hey, it's just a story. God created you. He can kill you whenever he wants. Okay, but that doesn't make him a good guy, and it has nothing to do with whether it's real. And I don't see how if all you're doing is calling in to say, hey, the Bible's just a story, you don't have to make any judgment about it. Yeah, I do. There's the overwhelming majority of the people on the planet have believed in a God of some kind or another. And the number of people who believe that the Bible is more than a storybook and then vote and legislate based on the beliefs that it dictates, that's a non-trivial number. And so we have to take it seriously. When people start voting on behalf of what they think Batman wants them to do, then all of a sudden there'll be the Batman Experience, and I'll do that show too.
Okay. Well, what happens is that there is a God in the Bible that gives life as much as he gives. So it doesn't have to be like, no, this guy is right, no, this guy is wrong. It's just the fact that it's what the Bible says. He gives as much life as he wants to give, and that's it.
We're not disputing the narrative. Like,
yes,
I'm trying to think of a better way to articulate. Matt and I both are familiar with the narrative. We're not disagreeing that is the narrative in the Bible. There is a life giver, and he takes lifeth awayeth. Okay, we both accept that. That is cool. We know what he does. He gives and he takes of the life thing, of substance, of stuff. Okay, Numa, gotcha. Okay, so the next part of this argument is how we feel about that aforementioned scenario of the life giving and the taking away. Those are two different things. If we weren't supposed to draw any type of conclusions or have our own perspectives about it, it's really odd that we tend to do that with literally every piece of media we encounter.
And what is the problem that you have with that?
Do you believe that the Bible is telling a true story, that the God of the Bible is real?
I do.
You do. Okay. See, because all of this that came before you answering that simple question was you presenting it as just if it's a fictional story. So now we've reached the point where you've acknowledged that you think this is a true story. Now, if God orders the killing of people, does that mean that God is good or evil?
Okay, I had to make clear one thing. When I started saying all this, I said I don't belong to any religion. I'm not a religious person. So I wanted to present it to you in a way that didn't have to be religious, because that's not the point. The point is that if there is a God.
Okay, you're muted. I need you to listen. I need you to buckle down, and focus for just a second. You can tell me all day long that you're not religious or advocating any particular religion. I don't care. You are saying that you are convinced that the Bible is telling a true story about a real God that you believe in. That means that even if you say, oh, I'm not a Christian, I'm not a Jew, I'm not a part of any of these religions, it doesn't matter. You've created a religion of your own. You have your view of the Bible and the God that's in the Bible, and you think he's real. And so I'm asking you to evaluate that God's character, and you keep coming back with something that sounds like, well, all you atheists have to do is just look at a story and not get so upset about it. I'm not upset about the fucking story. I'm upset that there are people like you who think that it is real and true and good, and you live your life and act in accordance with that and promoting those sorts of things. Now, if you're not the kind of person that wants to promote the religion that you believe in, no matter whether you want to use a label or not, okay, why are you calling?
All right. I presented the story like that, as a story, not a religious one, because you don't understand that part of the true side of the Bible, the true side of the story. That's why I was telling you that way. But when you come to asking me if I believe there is a God, yes, he's the one that gives life. Yes, he's the one that knows how much life is going to give.
Okay, what? I don't know why you would call. Hang on. Do you know my history?
Your personal history about religion, or knowledge about the Bible?
Yes.
I think I heard you say that you studied and then you studied and all that many times, the Bible, and you think you understand the Bible. But I say, if someone understands a story, is going to agree with it. If somebody doesn't understand the story, is going to disagree.
No, you're wrong. No.
Hold on. Let me just say one last thing.
Nope, you're not going to say one other thing. I'm muting you. You don't get to suggest. First of all, did you think in your wildest imagination that you were presenting a version of the story that either of us weren't familiar with? That's just bizarre. But now your argument has now shifted to anybody who understands the story would believe it. And so you're going to say, I don't understand the story. Isn't that what you just said? I'm going to hang on. It was not unmuting you. So you're suggesting that I don't believe it because I don't understand the story. Is that not what you just said?
No. What I'm saying is that I'm not talking about whether you understand the Bible or not. I'm saying if a person agrees with a story that is somebody's talking about, then he's going to disagree because doesn't understand it. But if that person understands what is in that story, is going to agree with it. You disagree because you don't understand it. Look, there was a God for...
You literally... I wish that and this is something that we're going to have to do technically. I want to... Somebody clip out from the moment that I muted him until the moment that I muted him again. And in the span of time that he's talking... He literally said that he's not saying I don't understand the story. And then he builds this case to where he literally says, I don't understand the story.
Just said it.
Which one of those is correct? Do I understand the fucking story or don't I?
This is what because you cut me off. You don't let me finish. Look, I'm going to give you an example. The aspect set of God. Okay.
Now. Goodbye. Yes, I cut you off and I don't let you finish. I muted you, and when you came out, I asked for clarification about a specific question. Are you saying that I don't understand? And you, within the span of a minute, said that you weren't saying that I didn't understand the Bible, and then you concluded with, you were saying that I didn't understand it, and that's why I muted you again. And then when you say, well, you won't let me finish, yeah, I did. You finished. You completely finished. You're done. You burnt. Bye.
Jeez.
Where are we going next, Drag?
Oh man, this Cade looks interesting.
Okay.
Line 24.
Oh yeah, and there's at least one more I definitely want to get to. Kate in Florida, you're on with Matt and Dragnauct. It says here you're a Christian college student having doubts. How do you become more open about them? And you could lose a lot if people found out. And yeah, you're right.
Yeah, guys. So I grew up in a Christian household. I still do. I live in a Christian household. I'm 19, so I live with my parents, and I commute to a Christian college in Florida.
I'm sorry.
I'm a Sunday school teacher at a Church of God church, and I'm a youth leader at our youth group. Is that all? You guys understand? You guys understand where I'm at here?
Yeah, I'm with you.
And
you, by the way,
and,
you sounded like you're in a position very similar to my ex-wife's position, where she stopped believing at around 14, 15 years old, but continued to teach Vacation Bible School and, all of those sorts of things, all the way up until she was working on her master's degree in college, running an atheist group, but still was closeted. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, so basically I've said, well, if I leave now, if I had, said my unbelief when I was around 15 or 16, which is when I really started doubting all the, I started sniffing out the BS my Bible teachers and such, because I went to Christian high school, were feeding me. I would have gotten in a lot of trouble. I would have been silenced, and I would have had to just pretend like I believed it. So I just pretended like I did without making the big deal. And, always, every time I would even bring up an issue I had with the proof that somebody had for creationism or things like that, the flood, I would be silenced and kind of reprimanded publicly for it. So I kept that to myself. But I'm 19 now, and I go to college and everything. And I originally was majoring in pre-med biology, which I really loved and I was doing well in. But I couldn't stand the headmaster for the scientific department. And it was Young Earth Creationist, this college science department, which handed out degrees in science while preaching Young Earth Creationism,
Can I interrupt for
everything like that.
Can I interrupt for a side question real quick?
Go ahead.
I realize that you're 19
Sure, absolutely.
and you're not a doctor, not a medical expert, but you've at least studied something in the realm. There was someone who called in who wanted our advice on how to deal with parents who think that the COVID-19 situation is a sign of the end times and Jesus coming back. And so I was wondering how you, as a Christian entertaining doubts who's also studied some biology and stuff, would respond if your parents had said something like that.
Well, I would. Well, okay. So my parents have said something like that. Do what?
I said, welcome to being a co-host. You weren't expecting that. I want you to answer somebody else's question.
No. Yeah, thanks. I think I'm one of the kind of more rational guests you guys have had today. My parents have said, and people that I've been with recently in my church, because I'm still involved. Nobody knows. I hope nobody's listening. But I would say, you've got to be kidding me. I work at a hospital, and there's people in the hospital. It's actually a South Florida Baptist is the hospital. I probably shouldn't have said that, but that's the hospital. And it's a Christian, quote unquote, hospital. And I have nurses. There was a nurse in there whose daughter was positive for coronavirus, and the nurse kept coming to work. And we said, why? Why would you come to work if you knew you were exposed to coronavirus by somebody in your own household? And she said, Jesus has got it under control. God's not going to let it spread through my hospital staff because I've prayed for you guys. And I said, let's get real here.
It needs to be fired. I'm sorry. Go ahead, man. She needs to be fired immediately.
Oh, I think that's happening. I think that's happening. I don't know though. But I said, let's get real here. Years ago, I began thinking pretty much every day from a secular worldview. I think it's more healthy. I think it's better. And I think it's just more rational. I watched these things in high school growing up. I don't know. I know you guys have probably seen it. The Ken Ham versus Bill Nye debate. As much of a debate it really wasn't. It was more of a schooling. We watched that, and we had to write an essay about how Ken Ham was right, and we had to point out the logical fallacies in Bill Nye's thing. And so I faked it. You know what I mean? And I had to
be the most difficult assignment I could imagine.
It could be
fun.
Was
horrible. I couldn't do it, but I was able to push through, and I put the pen to paper basically, and pretended to agree with
Right.
god awful Ken Ham. So anyways, like I was trying to get to, I continue, I'm not saying you interrupted me, but I continue through my life pretending, and I'm teaching Sunday school, right? And we get through the curriculum and Genesis comes up, and I just said, nope, not teaching it. Couldn't do it. I'm not going to teach lies to my 10-year-olds that I truly love them. They're awesome. I'm not going to lie to them. You know what I mean? I couldn't bring myself to do that.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to ask, if I don't believe what I'm teaching, the reason that I'm still teaching it is because I know that from the position that I'm in, I'm able to actually speak good things in here, because I can do better. I can be secular, but also teach Sunday school without, contradicting their beliefs. I'm just not going to indoctrinate them with false ones. Anyways, I've been talking for a while. You guys go ahead.
Cade, let me tell you what you are. You are the equivalent of a member of the Clergy Project. You're not actually.
Yeah, I'm familiar.
But you are in exact same situation where your life is completely surrounded and soaking in something that you don't accept wholly or have issues with, and you're putting the best face on it you can. I've worked with a number of members of the Clergy Project. Some of them have become friends of mine. Some of them are still in the ministry, and they're doing what you're doing, which is, since I'm stuck here, let me put the best face on this I can, and let me try to teach people actual good values, even if it doesn't match up with what my religion said. So you're like the non-clergy project person.
Yeah, I agree. The weird thing about it is my whole social circle, growing up in high school, or a Christian school, I go to a Christian college, I live in a Christian home, and I go to church. That's my social circle completely, basically. I can't remember the last time, except for right now, that I've talked to an atheist. It's really refreshing, by the way.
You should try to find a group in your area where you can essentially maintain your anonymity and stuff, and yet interact with like-minded people.
Right. Well, the issue is, one of the huge issues I have is, if I were to come out, not as atheist, don't get me wrong. I love you guys, and I think atheists on average are more rational, probably better humans than a lot of Christians that I know. I'm not quite prepared to say that I'm an atheist, and I'm not going to say convert to atheist. I know that's not what it is. It's more of a deconversion. But I'm not there yet. I believe that there's a God, and the reason I believe in a God is for no rational reason at all. I'm a scientist at heart, and I would never say to you that I can prove God or that I can't prove God. I just believe in God because there is something instead of nothing, and I know that's a really bad argument, but I'm not making a logical or rational reason for my argument. I know it's irrational, but I choose to keep it. And whether or not in a few months I keep that argument, I don't know.
You're in very good company, Cade, and I'll tell you. And while I would be happy someday to sit down with you and have.
If I'm ever in Austin, I'll hit you up.
Definitely, but have a discussion and have you say, "Yep, I don't believe this stuff" or whatever, or you're more comfortable with the A label, but you're not alone. And
also because I'm worried that somebody from my church is listening.
Yeah, I actually was chatting with Vern about the possibility of setting up a way to pitch shift, flange, modify voices for people who had those concerns. But the thing is,
like the Clergy Project,
you're not alone, even remotely. I have very close friends and family members who are not atheists, who agree with me on a vast number of things, who are largely skeptics, and they're acknowledging that their belief is for a bad reason. And one of Martin Gardner is considered kind of one of the fathers of modern skepticism. And he believed in God and acknowledged that he was not applying skepticism to the question properly. And so that made him both a really good skeptic and a really crappy skeptic at the same time, because it's like someone who knows and understands and is advocating for skepticism and critical thinking and good standards of evidence, and then willingly suspends that for this particular topic because it feels good. And the good part of him acknowledges, I'm doing this because it feels good to me. I'm not trying to convince anybody else. I have no arguments. I have no evidence. I understand it's not compatible with my skepticism. On the other hand, it makes him somewhat of a not good skeptic, because He's unwilling to apply skepticism universally while stating that it should be. This is where we get to the thing that we are all flawed humans, and we are not always able to understand why we think or do the things that we think or do. We are really good at rationalizing.
Yeah, okay. I've been introspective about it. I've said, my favorite, I guess if this is an applicable labeling of it, my favorite atheist quote is one of a guy, and I can't quote it, so I'll paraphrase it, but he says that man looks at the prenatal abyss with much more calm than the one he's heading for. Have you heard it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've heard it in different versions, but I think I've heard that prenatal one.
Right. I have no issue with a post-mortem abyss. I think, shoot, if all I get is earth and I die and nothing happens, I'm cool with that, So I know most people hold to religion, and I think religion maybe even started because people were afraid of death, right?
Yeah.
And, I have this whole thing where I think, why do I think my religion's right? Why do we just diss on everybody else and think that Christianity is the right one? So am I a Christian anymore? I don't know. I haven't seen any proof of the resurrection. I haven't seen any proof of the Bible. I'm holding on to something because I grew up in Central Florida, evangelical, crazy town, basically. And I don't want to disappoint anybody, I think is the main reason I'm holding on to it. And like I said, if a few months from now I change my view completely, I would not even be surprised.
I wouldn't be surprised either, but I also wouldn't be surprised if you didn't, because one of the things that we as human beings are really good at doing is rationalizing and staying put. And our fear of change and consequences puts us all in that position. But don't beat yourself up over it, because basically what you've done now is you've carved out an area where you are going to be rational and secular in all things except for this one thing. And as long as
I think that this one thing, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm just saying, as long as that one thing is encapsulated and kind of quarantined off,
okay,
you're probably okay, and you're certainly not out there actively doing harm on behalf of the beliefs that people you go to church with. Yeah,
of course.
Yeah.
So I think I let my reason take me as far as it can. And when something is metaphysical and non-provable and, you can't disprove it, right? I know that's a horrible argument, but I think that's where I let my faith kind of just go, you know what? Okay, let's use faith here. It's the only realm of the world. It's the unnatural world that is actually, has a benefit from having faith. Anyways, guys, I just wanted to say that if I were to come out as atheist, right? How much damage that would do to me, I think is beyond what even you guys might understand. My college, I had to sign a paper that I was a Christian and that I am lifelong saved Christian. If you say I'm an atheist at this university, they can revoke you. And I'm going there on full academic scholarship. I can't risk that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, fake it till you make it, man. If you really want your white lab coat, fake it till you make it.
Yep.
I'll tell you right now that your goal is more important.
Yep. While Sam Harris wrote a book about lying, and I think he has since kind of acknowledged that some of it was perhaps an oversimplification. I'll have to talk to him about it some later time. But my thing is that there are situations where the best possible thing you can do is lie. The prime example is, if Anne Frank's hiding in your attic and the Nazis show up and say, is Anne Frank here? Lying is the best thing that you can do. It is the moral thing. And so now Sam has some nuances there that I could dig into at another time. The key here is we're going to move on to the last couple callers, but I want you to recognize two things. First of all, you didn't really need me or Drag for any of this conversation. At almost every turn, you were both making the case, pointing out why it wasn't a good case and everything else. So it seemed like mostly what you were wanting to know is, is it okay for me in this position where I have so much at risk if I come out as a non-believer to go ahead and stay closeted and be deceptive and keep trying to do good? And if that's all you're looking for, then yes, we will wave hands and bless
I
you.
guess that's a good analysis.
Yeah.
I guess that's good. Can I finish with one sentence about what you said about Anne Frank?
Yeah.
I'll say one more thing, and I'll say goodbye. We use in my church, in Christian learning in high school, actually, we use that as an example, the Anne Frank argument. So
Right.
if Anne Frank was hiding in your ceiling, would you tell the Nazis that she was there? And my Christian mentors made the case that, yeah, you would. Because the Bible says not to lie, but it doesn't say not to tell them the Anne Frank's in your ceiling.
Yes.
And that is one of the reasons I'm against pretty much everything that our church has taught. It's insane. So
Yeah, it's the thing is that there is within the model a way to argue for that, which is everything happens according to God's plan. God has told me not to lie. And so if I tell the truth, God is going to take care of the situation in the way that he wants to, and everything's going to happen according to God's plan. It's not up to me to decide to violate God's law about lying based on my own limited understanding. And until such time as you have a good demonstration that there is a God being that's going to step in and govern this and do the right thing, that's a bunch of crap, and you should lie your happy little ass off.
yeah, thanks, guys. I know there's a lot of callers waiting. I won't make them wait anymore. All right,
Yep.
see you guys. You guys are smart and awesome.
Thanks, Kate. Take care of yourself.
That was nice.
So I got 2 calls left. The last one, we're going to take Laura now, but the last
I knew you were going to pick that one.
yeah. We're going to save Justin for last, so it's a little bit of advice. But Laura in Michigan is saying that they've been in the presence of God, and yes, there is free will in heaven. How are you, Lauren? Or Laura, sorry.
Hi, I'm Laura. Yes, I'm good. Thank you.
What
I'd
do
like
you
to say I
mean?
love your show.
What do you mean you've been in the presence of God? I don't know what that means.
He comes whenever I want to talk to him. He can actually appear for me.
And he talks to you and answers
When I
questions?
need to. Well, I have to purify my heart, and I have to be serious, and my question has to be precise.
Okay.
It can't be dizzy in the head, which I tend to do. And before I talk to him, sometimes it will take days because I have to get rid of the selfishness and the pride. And getting rid of pride is like extremely hard.
Well, it seems that there's a way that we could test this. And that is
Yes, he's right here, right now.
God's there right
What
now.
would you like to ask him?
Ask God what you should say to me to convince me that he's real.
He loves you very much, and you're doing an excellent job for him.
Yeah, that is not remotely the right answer. So I guess we've tested.
Well,
our
you don't understand the job he's doing.
No,
You're doing this excellent job.
no, Laura, you
I have so many.
You misunderstood the thing. I asked you to ask God what you should say to me to convince me that he's real. And you replied with something that did not convince me that he was real. So either you're wrong or God's wrong. Which one is it?
Oh, well, your heart has to be open to love.
My heart is plenty open to love, but that is also something that you should not have said. See, if God were real, God knows me, right?
No, I'm not.
If God's real, God knows me, right?
Yeah.
And God knows exactly what would change my mind, right?
Oh, you think it's a simple thing.
No, I'm asking a question. Does God know what would change my mind?
It's time and much study and much.
Yeah. I've done more time and more study on this subject than probably any believer you're likely to run across. And so, yeah, that's another. You have access to God, Laura. Why would you ever respond to me without asking God what you should say first? Because if God wants you to say certain things and you're saying the wrong things, aren't you doing a disservice to God?
No, you're assuming that what I said was not what he said because it's not what you're accepting.
No. See, acceptance was included in the question. So either you don't understand logical reasoning or God doesn't understand logical reasoning. Which one is it?
Is love logical?
I think it's you that doesn't understand logical reasoning.
Let me try something, Matt. So
go ahead, Drag.
You have access to an omnipotent an omnipotent, omnipotent, omnipresent deity, correct?
Correct.
Laura? Okay. And
Yes.
this deity would presumably know everything about me, right?
Yes.
And you having access to this entity who knows everything about me can and will pass that information to you, correct?
Oh, no.
No.
Not
Okay.
everything.
Not everything. What
To
about
every
simple things?
individual? To every individual, it is a miracle that you come to the understanding of him.
Cool.
And I am a human being, and no matter what he says to me, there is no way I am physically possible of presenting to you the information that will bring you to his heart.
No. That's not what Drag. That's not what Drag is asking. That's not what Drag is asking. Let me try this. If Dragnaught were to think of a number between 1 and 1,000,000, would God know what number Dragnaught is thinking of?
I would hope so.
And if you ask God to tell you what number Dragnaught is thinking of,
Would he answer that? No, he wouldn't give me that information. He doesn't play games.
why not? Ask
Because
God why. Ask God why he won't give you that information.
It's really weird because that would convince me.
Like I'm thinking of a number.
I don't think that would.
It doesn't matter what you think. It matters what we think and what God thinks. You are irrelevant. You are the conduit to God. You're calling in to say that you are the conduit to the creator, governor, and Lord of the universe who knows everything. It doesn't matter what you think.
So my personal credulity is based on what you're convinced of?
Each of us are thinking of a number between 1 and 1,000,000. Ask God what number we're thinking of or hang up.
I'm sorry, you didn't get my point.
Your point's incoherent. I'm not sure how else to get that across to you. Like this, there's a reason I'd asked Laura that question.
Yeah.
Right. It's like and Matt, you saw where I was going with that, and
like a freight train, and Laura didn't. God didn't even clue her into what she was getting into when she called. So all you people who think you can talk to God, before you dial the number to call us, ask God if you should call us, because if that was part of God's plan, then I think God's plan is to continue demonstrating that there's no rational reason to think that he exists and that his advocates look like buffoons. That's got to be God's plan, because that's what's happening. God is punking you. If God's telling you to call this show and knows what we're going to say and knows what we're going to ask, knows what would convince us, what would change our mind, and what number Drag and I are thinking of, and God wants you to call in to say that we're just closed to love, bullshit. I've been loved. I love lots of people. I have special loves. Oh, you're just not open to God's love. No. Those are all post hoc rationalizations. That's you making up excuses for why you can't do the shit you claim you can do, which is get an answer from God. Oh, well, God, there's nothing that would change your mind. Well, then that's what you should have said. If it's true that there's nothing that would change my mind, then when I ask God, hey, what could I say that would change my mind? And he'd say, nothing. Hell, that would have been closer to accurate than anything that you spewed forth from your brain.
Well, asking what number I was thinking of. 58. That was the number.
Yeah, mine was 438,729. But that's why I went from one to 1,000,000. And if you hit both of them, like if you'd have spewed forth both of those numbers in our heads,
I would have had to take a step out. I would have had to excuse myself.
I would have spent the next week in serious contemplation as a magician, as a mentalist, trying to figure out. I mean, that structure is impossible for me to merely think of a number, communicating it to no one, writing it down nowhere, and for you to just tell me what the number is. I still couldn't conclude that it was God, but you would have access to some sort of power that is beyond my comprehension and beyond anything that's ever been demonstrated anywhere. Instead, what we got was, here's somebody who thinks they talk to God, and when they talk to God, they get crap answers. I mean, I got better answers from the Tiger King guy than you got from God.
Look, that man has wisdom beyond his years.
And evidently that's not him singing. All right, we're going to end the show by talking to Justin in Lubbock, Texas, who's got a serious issue, and I want to get Dragnaught's thoughts on it. How are you doing, Justin?
Good. How are you, Matt?
Wondermus.
Well, the issue is I'm a non-believer. My girlfriend is Christian, and we have a child on the way. She's expressed some concern to me about introducing the idea to our child at some point that there is no God. She doesn't, I wouldn't quite describe her as religious. She doesn't necessarily go to church, but she is a faith-based thinker in Christianity. And I'm not quite sure what my realm of influence is supposed to be here. Like, what is my percent stake in the influence of bringing this child up and somehow helping them find a means of establishing a worldview? What's the middle ground? How respectful do I need to be to her right to influence her child, our child? What is, I guess I'm just trying to figure out a middle ground here and establish some perspective on the issue.
So I'm gonna let Drag dig into this as it's the last call, but I'm gonna start by saying I only have a couple bits of advice. One of them, by the way, doesn't come from me. It came directly from my girlfriend who's listening, which is you need to start talking about this as soon as possible. This is something that you cannot keep putting off because there's an eventuality coming that you need to address. And my only point, and I'm going to let Drag finish this out, is open and honest communication from the two of you is a must, or you are begging for disaster.
Yeah, huge issue. So my wife is not an atheist. She floats in between different sort of beliefs. Usually she is agnostic. What most people's definition for agnostic, we're not getting into that, but we have discussed this years prior to us conceiving a child. And one of the early things that you should probably establish is, what are my left and right limits, right? So what are we going to allow, and under no circumstances are we ever going to allow? And that will give you a rough estimate or a gauge on sort of what you're going to do when you cross those bridges, right? So I'll give you a more tangible example. I have sort of soft limits. I would prefer my child not to be given any VeggieTale stories or DVD, any of that kind of stuff, because I don't find them very useful. I find them as indoctrination tools for kids into Christianity, and I don't appreciate this shit. I'm just gonna be honest. But what I do want is, I want the interaction between my child and his family members, grandparents, whoever, and give them an opportunity to introduce their religious beliefs, because that is actually very important to understand when you start interacting with other people who have different views. So I think it is important, and you should capitalize and focus on primarily education. And I cannot place a greater emphasis on education. Understanding the Bible is not necessarily the direction I'm going in, but it helps. Understanding critical thought, teaching them philosophy, right? Understanding how epistemology works, understanding, what fallacious thinking is. You don't have to go through a daily lecture of, Aristotle, right? But you can place an emphasis on that. And just to try and, satisfy some of the more religious, overtones to whatever your partner or family members may want. There are church fathers who were philosophers, right? And they've incorporated certain instances of skepticism, and I put that in air quotes, skepticism, and try to use that as a launch pad for your goal, which is to help foster an environment where you are an integral part in rearing a child to think for themselves over everything else. You want them to be able to be equipped with the tools to draw their own conclusions. And that's honestly the long and short of it.
So essentially, it's not about trying to influence them in terms of God is not real, the Bible's full of misinformation and fairy tales, what have you. It's more about teaching the child how to think and how to approach issues in terms of independent thinking instead of just swallowing things whole and without questioning the source.
Right.
Is that kind of what you're saying?
Because I could tell you, I criticize theists for just swallowing dogma from whoever they like. But I also jump on atheists because there's a lot of them. There's a lot of atheists who do just that. They don't actually know how to think critically. They're not critical thinkers at all. And this is something that if you can push someone in the correct direction and just sort of guide them along the path, that's better for them ultimately, because then they get to take agency in their personal growth.
Yes, and you know, the main issue for me is, and I mean, I don't know if it sounds dramatic or not, but the idea of indoctrinating children with theology at an age where they're not capable of mounting a respectable or an informed argument for or against to me is bizarre, and I just don't want to see my child, their personality, their mode of behavior and thinking be shaped by something that is just hanging in the balance of, you know, faith and just believing something for the sake of believing it. And I guess, I mean, that's pretty much it. The most honest thing I think I've ever admitted to myself is that I don't know, just like everybody else. And I guess that's what I want for my child, is just to be able to understand the fact that it's okay not to know. It's okay to be intimidated by the larger questions in life. You don't have to necessarily cling to something that makes you feel warm and cozy just because it sounds good coming from an adult.
Well, children learn by the adults that they're around and their peers. If your child sees you engaging in discussion with, you know, theistic friends and family members, and they catch on to the fact that the family members run from you in a conversation, children pick up on that. They will pick up on that strongly. So I would say lead by example. If you are fearful of them picking up these dogmas and then, you know, hindering their life by believing in them, then it's up to you to show, like, look, your family members, I'll just use mine as an example. My cousins in North Carolina will not question their pastor at all. They will have actually told me that they won't question them. Whatever that church says, they will believe it. So that church could tell them to stop breathing and they'll stop breathing. And so you can pose to a child, like, would you rather reevaluate claims that people say, or would you rather accept claims and not, you know, think about what it does to you? And then through those really simple analogies, right, you can get a child to understand that, you know what, I might want to be in a better position to reevaluate things. This whole religion deal doesn't have a whole lot of reevaluating now, does it?
Yeah, you're going to need to communicate, but you're also going to need to understand compromises. And one of the most tempting compromises is to say something like, okay, I won't tell him that God's not real as long as you don't try and tell him that God is real. And now that can come off incredibly problematic. And so the better thing to do is to say, instead of teaching them God is real or God is not real, why don't we teach them there are many different beliefs that people have about gods and the supernatural and the natural and what's true and what's not true. Let's figure out what we can work together to find the answers for. And let's agree that if we haven't found a definitive, supported by evidence answer, that the one and only correct answer is, I don't know.
Honest.
That's understandable. But, you know, with a lot of believers, it's opening up a can of worms, what is evidence-based when faith comes into play, you know?
Yeah, it's a good conversation, though. You can get to the Munchausen trilemma. If, you know, however deep you want to go into that, that's something that I was having a conversation with a buddy of mine, a soccer accountant. I think Ozymandias actually got into it. And now I say his name just like G-Man says his name. But it opens up, it broaches a really good discussion on how do we come to a conclusion? What is it? What is a conclusion? What is evidence? We use these terms, but what do they actually mean? And that's something, that curiosity that gets sparked will only help you in the end, especially if you're trying to foster the mind of a young, impressionable child.
Hey, and we've run really long, Justin, and I'm going to go ahead and put an end to this here, but by all means, find a local community in your area, reach out to Recovering from Religion. If you can, drop down here in Austin, send us an email at tv@atheist-community.org and let us know what's going on. And you can also jump into the Discord, where I'm sure there are people chomping at the bit to tell you their similar stories of having had to deal with this and what worked and what didn't work. The fact that you are concerned about it and are open to continuing to work together in love, communicating honestly, I'm not all that worried about what's going to happen to your kid.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Thanks a lot, Justin. So that is where we're going to end the call. And I want to thank
Dragnaught. Dragnaught.
I want to thank Dragnaught for coming on today, especially in the times where we're having to do stuff remotely. I wasn't sure that this was actually going to work out, but Mark and Vern and everybody involved back in the virtual studio are just outstanding. And while we miss Gary today, there's the empty studio. Every one of those machines is being remotely connected to by a member of the crew to do the stuff that we need to do to get this here. And I always love having you on,
Dragnaught.
I love having you on. I want everybody in chat to know that at some point in the near future, when we're able to, I would like to have
Dragnaught
back on the show. And in the meantime, you all take care of yourselves. I appreciate both the attendance and the people watching the show, and in particular, people who donated, both at Patreon in order to help keep promoting the shows. But I'm told that there were quite a few donations made today in Super Chat and everything else, including folks like Maximilian and others. We greatly appreciate that, because one of the things that's going to be happening in the next couple of weeks is for all of the regular hosts and co-hosts who don't have a home studio set up the way that I do, we're going to be upgrading webcams and earbuds and microphones and stuff, and so that they can have the highest quality going out to all of you who are watching, and so that we can continue working to knock down the latency in the show, which is a little problematic. So everybody out there, where do they find you?
Hit it. You got it?
Tell them where to find you.
Oh, they can find me. I thought you were going to hit the button. They can find me.
I'm talking to you. I'm talking to you.
I was waiting for the button. So yeah, if you go on youtube.com/Dragnaught, you can find me. I'm usually streaming 3 times a week, every other day. I pick a different interesting person from YouTube, and I'll do a live review of their videos, usually with my shirt off. And so I participate in the chat, see everyone's comments. And so if you do enjoy me being on here, I will be back. Like Matt said, look, your donations are going to keep the lights on. They explained to me how all this is even working, and let me tell you, it's just not cheap. So thank you all. But my link will be posted in the live chat. I think best name here, and a couple other people will have it. Go ahead and subscribe, hit the bell and all that kind of stuff, and you can catch playlists of me reviewing people's channels. And if you have a question for me, dragnaught@gmail.com. And I try to get back to people fairly regularly. So yeah, I will also be starting a petition to prosecute Carol Baskins. But other than that, no. I'm just kidding.
Hey, I got one last thing.
Dragnaught.
You know who you should have hang out with you sometime?
Matt Dillahunty.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. If you guys want to see.
There's a soundboard for G-Man, if you're wondering where all that's coming from. And I'm going to, before I thank the crew, I'm going to play my favorite of those. This is G-Man explaining something that the rest of us probably would have pronounced differently.
Well, a male is somebody with a penis, and a woman is someone with a vagina. I don't know how to be more blunt than that.
I know how you can be more blunt, but I'd ask you to first put down the blunt, step away from the blunt. Anyway, thanks to those of you who watched. Thanks to everybody who donated. Thanks to Dragnaught for being on here today. Thanks to the cast and crew. We will be back next week with more of the Atheist Experience Live. Don't forget, next Saturday is going to be a special event for Easter weekend with some games and other stuff, and Mark will have the information. Until then, take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.
What are we doing, man? What are we doing?
No, you're done.